The wind howled outside like a wounded animal, tearing through the trees and rattling the windows of the small, aging house. Rain slammed against the roof in waves, each gust of wind shaking the frail structure with unsettling force. Inside, the light in Mia's room was dim and flickering, casting soft shadows over the worn wooden floor. Ethan sat at the edge of his daughter's bed, gently brushing her damp hair from her forehead. Her breathing had finally evened out. Her tiny frame curled up under the covers, blissfully unaware of the storm raging outside. His phone buzzed sharply on the nightstand. He hesitated before answering. Unknown number. "Hello?" he said, his voice quiet and tired. A woman's voice came through the line, shaking. "I'm sorry it's late, I know, but I need help. My roof, it's leaking badly and water is pouring into my bedroom. I think it's about to collapse." Ethan blinked, standing slowly, his free hand resting on the window frame as lightning briefly lit up the sky. "Where are you?" he asked. She gave him the address. His brow furrowed. It was far, out near the edge of town, practically in the foothills, a place few people lived. "I'm really sorry," he said, glancing back at Mia, who stirred faintly in her sleep. "I have a daughter here. She's only 6, and I can't leave her alone. Besides, it's coming down hard out there. I don't do emergency calls this late." There was a pause, then her voice, softer now, almost a whisper. "Please, I'm scared. I'm alone and the roof is creaking like it's going to fall any minute. I don't know what to do." He heard the panic in her voice, the subtle desperation threaded between the words. Then, just behind it, the unmistakable sound of water dripping rapidly and wind howling through a crack. "I'm sorry," he repeated. "I hope you find someone nearby." And then he hung up. Ethan stood there for a moment, staring at the silent phone in his hand. The guilt set in almost immediately. He told himself it was the right call. He had to be here for Mia. He was a father first, and it was dangerous to drive out there. He didn't even know this woman. She could be exaggerating, or worse, it could be a scam, but her voice echoed in his head. "I'm scared. I'm alone." He went to the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water, but found himself standing by the window instead, watching the rain come down harder now, slashing sideways as the wind picked up. Lightning lit the sky again, revealing how the streets had begun to flood at the edges. He paced, sat down, stood up again. His eyes kept drifting to Mia's room, to the soft glow under her door. He could still hear her even breathing. But then he saw her face. Not Mia's, hers, the woman's. He didn't even know her name. Just the sound of her voice, fragile, like someone holding back tears while trying to stay calm. And he imagined her alone in a dark house, ceiling groaning above her, rain spilling in. What if she was injured? What if the roof did collapse, and he'd been the only one who picked up? He cursed under his breath. Within moments, he had grabbed his coat, boots, flashlight, and keys. He slipped into Mia's room, kissed her forehead, and whispered something in her ear. Then, he gently picked her up and carried her across the yard to the home of their neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, a retired school teacher who adored Mia like her own granddaughter. She opened the door in her nightgown, surprised. "Ethan, is everything all right? Can you watch Mia for a bit?" he asked, breathless. "Someone needs help. It's serious." Without hesitation, she nodded, taking the sleeping child from his arms. "Of course, go." He turned without another word and jogged back toward his truck, the rain instantly drenching him. He started the engine, wipers screeching against the windshield, and Victoire go through the storm just enough to see the gravel driveway where the GPS directed him. The house came into view, dark, half hidden behind overgrown shrubs, with a faint light glowing from an upstairs window. He killed the engine and stepped out, heart pounding. Wind slammed the door shut behind him. As he rushed toward the house, he thought again of her voice on the phone, the fear in it, the fragility. He didn't know who she was, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let her face this storm alone. The house sat on the far edge of town, nestled between dense trees and rolling hills barely visible through the curtain of rain. It was quiet out here. Too quiet. No streetlights, no nearby neighbors. Only the howling wind and the heavy thud of raindrops against the rooftop broke the silence. Inside, the flickering light of a single lamp cast long, dancing shadows across the small living room, where puddles had already begun to form on the hardwood floor. Arya stood at the base of the stairs, soaked from head to toe, a thin raincoat clinging to her body. Her hands trembled as she clutched a plastic tarp and a roll of duct tape. She had made a dozen phone calls, neighbors, contractors, even a local handyman's hotline, but either they declined or didn't pick up. When Ethan had finally answered, only to say no, something inside her had splintered. There was no one left to call. She was alone. With a determined breath, she climbed the stairs to the attic, where a gaping hole in the roof let in the fury of the storm. The wind howled through the opening, lifting loose shingles and sending debris skittering across the floor. Rain poured in, soaking the insulation and leaving the floor slick and treacherous. Arya swallowed hard and stepped out onto the edge of the roof. She had done crazier things in her life, but never this reckless. Still, desperation dulled her fear. She moved carefully, crouching low, using both hands to spread the tarp across the broken section. Each gust of wind threatened to lift her off the roof like a scrap of paper. She reached for the duct tape, but just as she leaned forward, her foot slid on the slick tiles. She lost her balance. A sharp scream pierced the storm as her leg twisted awkwardly and struck a protruding iron bracket near the chimney. Pain exploded up her calf. She flailed, trying to catch herself, but gravity had already won. She slipped, tumbling down the slope of the roof. Just then, a pair of strong arms caught her mid-fall, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. Ethan had arrived in the nick of time, barely having stepped out of his truck when he saw her, silhouetted against the stormy sky, slipping into danger. Without hesitation, he had sprinted toward the house and up the attic ladder. His momentum carried them both over the edge, and they crashed together into the overgrown grass below. The fall was cushioned by wet earth and thick weeds, but the landing was still jarring. They rolled apart, groaning. Ethan sat up first, wiping water from his eyes. "What the hell were you thinking?" he snapped, his voice sharp, almost panicked. Arya winced, clutching her leg. "I didn't have a choice." "You didn't have a choice?" he repeated, incredulous. "You climbed onto your roof in the middle of a goddamn storm." "I couldn't wait," she shouted back, her voice cracking. "No one else would help." "Me." Ethan opened his mouth to reply, then stopped. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. Her hair was soaked and tangled, her face pale and streaked with rain. She was shivering, hugging her arms around herself, and in her eyes was something raw, not fear, not anger, just exhaustion. She wasn't reckless. She was alone and desperate. He stood up slowly and offered her his hand. "Come on, let's get you inside." She hesitated, then took it. He helped her to her feet, carefully supporting her as she tested her injured leg. She winced and nearly fell again, but he caught her. This time she didn't resist, leaning into him. Once back inside, Ethan eased her onto the couch and quickly retrieved a towel from the bathroom. He crouched beside her, drying her shoulders and wrapping another towel around her. "Your ankles, already swelling," he said, inspecting her leg. "I landed on that iron bracket," she muttered. "It felt like my shin exploded." "Well, it didn't," he said. "You're lucky." She gave a bitter smile. "Lucky is not a word I use much these days." He didn't reply right away, his jaw tightening. "I shouldn't have said no earlier. That's on me." Arya looked up, surprised by the change in his tone. "I didn't know how bad it was," he continued, "and I've got my daughter to think about, but I should have come." She gave a soft nod. "I get it. You've got someone who depends on you." "Me? No one would even notice if this place blew away." Ethan leaned back, his arms resting on his knees. "You're wrong about that." The storm continued to hammer the roof above them, but the hole was now blocked by the tarp, though barely. He'd still need to climb back up there and finish the job. But for now, they sat together in silence, the weight of the night pressing down around them. Eventually, Arya whispered, "Thank you for catching me." He gave a half smile. "You're welcome." Try not to make it a habit. Despite everything, the pain in her leg, the storm outside, the lingering sting of rejection, she laughed softly, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like the world was completely falling apart. Inside the small, dimly lit living room, the storm outside continued to lash against the windows. But within the walls, something gentler had begun to settle. Ethan crouched near the old brick fireplace, fumbling with damp kindling and matches. It took a few tries, but finally, a soft flame began to flicker, casting an amber glow across the space. The warmth slowly crept in, chasing away the chill that clung to their soaked clothes and skin. Arya sat curled up in an oversized armchair, a thick blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her leg was propped on a cushion, and her hair still clung to her cheeks in wet strands. She held a steaming mug of tea that Ethan had made, more warm, water than anything else. But the gesture was enough to ease the trembling in her hands. Ethan glanced over as he stoked the fire. "You're lucky," he said, his voice quieter now, more thoughtful. "Could have been worse out there." "Don't feel lucky," Arya murmured. "But thank you for showing up." He didn't respond right away. He just nodded and sank into the chair across from her, his posture tense, like someone not used to sitting still for too long. The silence between them stretched, not uncomfortable, just unspoken. "Your daughter?" Arya said softly. "Mia, right?" Ethan's eyes softened. "Yeah, she's 6. Bright kid, smarter than me, probably. She's lucky to have you." He gave a half smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. "I try. Her mom, she died giving birth." Arya's face changed instantly, her expression folding into quiet sympathy. "I'm sorry." It was sudden. Complications during labor. She was healthy right up to that night. He paused, swallowing hard. "We were living in the city back then. I had a good job. Civil engineer, big projects, high-rises even. But after she passed, I couldn't keep it together. Not with a newborn. So I left it all, came back here. Took any job I could get. Plumbing, roofing, car work, anything that let me stay close to home." Arya watched him, her fingers tightening around the mug. "That's a lot." "I didn't have a choice," he said. "I didn't want a nanny raising her. I wanted her to know my face when she opened her eyes." He looked away, his jaw flexing as he stared into the fire. "I used to have dreams. Now I just have one hope each night, that she sleeps through till morning, that she's safe, that I've done something right for her that day." For a long moment, Arya said nothing. She simply watched him, this rugged man who had rescued her from her rooftop and now sat before her, worn down but steady. Something about the way he spoke, direct, unpolished, unguarded, moved her more than she expected. "I never knew my father that way," she said quietly. Ethan looked up. He was powerful, successful. Everyone knew his name. But when I was a child, I used to wonder if he even knew mine. He gave me this name, Arya, after an opera he loved, but he never really looked at me like I was a person. Just another proof of his legacy. "That's a hell of a way to grow up," Ethan said, his voice softer now. "I ran from all of it, the money, the pressure, the people who only saw me as a ticket to something. I bought this place under a different name. No assistants, no drivers, just quiet. I wanted to feel normal for once, even if it meant sitting in the rain with a broken roof." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You don't seem like most rich people I've met." "I don't want to be," she replied. "And you're the first person who's looked at me tonight and not asked what I do or who I am or how much I make." He chuckled dryly. "You didn't exactly give me the chance." Arya smiled, a little sheepishly. "That's true." He looked at her a moment longer. "Arya Lane," he repeated. "Well, I guess we're both not exactly where we thought we'd be in life." "No," she said, her voice gentler. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing." The wind outside began to ease just a little, the furious hammering of rain turning into a steadier rhythm. Ethan stood and stretched, glancing toward the attic. "I'll need to go back up and secure that tarp better. It'll hold through the night, but I wouldn't trust it beyond that." Arya nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around her. careful." He hesitated before leaving the room, then looked back. "You're not as alone as you think, Arya." Her eyes followed him as he walked out. The fire crackled behind her, a small but steady warmth growing in the room. She leaned back in the chair, her ankles still aching, but her heart strangely lighter. For the first time in a long while, someone had shown up, not because of her name, but in spite of it. Outside, the storm continued its slow retreat. Inside, in the glow of the fire, Arya sat in silence, no longer shivering. She watched the flames, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet thought took root. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally been seen. The rain had stopped 2 days ago, but the air still smelled of damp earth and pine needles. Arya's house, while still showing signs of wear, already looked more alive than it had in years. A new warmth lingered in its rooms, partly from the fixed roof and the firewood Ethan had helped her stack, but mostly from the people who now passed through its doors. It was late morning when Ethan pulled up in his truck, Mia sitting beside him, her face pressed to the window. Arya had called the night before, asking if he could take a look at the faulty heating system and the loose railing on the porch. She had tried to sound casual, but there had been a hopeful undercurrent in her voice that he hadn't missed. Now, as he stepped out of the truck, Mia practically bounced out before him. "Hi, Miss Arya," she called, running up the steps where Arya was already waiting with a gentle smile and a plate of warm banana muffins. "Well, hello, sunshine," Arya said, kneeling to offer Mia a muffin. Fresh from the oven, Mia's eyes lit up. "You're like a fairy godmother, a fairy who bakes." Ethan chuckled, closing the truck door. "She's been talking about those muffins since last time." Arya laughed lightly. "Then I guess I'll have to make sure there's always a fresh batch when you come by." The morning passed quickly. Ethan worked on the heating system while Mia helped Arya in the kitchen. Arya's laugh echoed through the house more than once, and each time, Ethan paused just slightly in his work, listening. Later, he found the two of them at the piano. Arya played softly, her fingers flowing over the keys like water. Mia leaned against her, watching in awe. The melody was unfamiliar, but its beauty was undeniable. "What song is that?" Ethan asked, as he entered the room. "It's something my mother used to play," Arya said. "I haven't played it in years, but I thought Mia might like it." "I love it," Mia chimed in, smiling wide. "She's a magic piano lady." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, a rare softness in his eyes. He hadn't seen Mia this relaxed in months, maybe longer. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Arya invited them to stay for dinner. It was a simple meal: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. But something about eating at her table made it feel like more, like family. Mia sat between them, happily chatting about school, her favorite books, and a dream she'd had, where she and Arya flew on a giant muffin through the clouds. Arya laughed until she had tears in her eyes, and Ethan found himself smiling more than he had in weeks. "You're good with her," he said quietly, as they washed dishes side by side afterward. Arya shrugged, her voice softer. "She makes it easy. She's a beautiful soul." Ethan nodded. "She gets that from her mom." Arya hesitated, then asked, "If you ever lost her too, would you still be you?" He turned sharply, the soapy plate in his hand slipping slightly. "What? I just mean sometimes we tie so much of ourselves to the people we love. I wonder who we'd be without them." Ethan's expression darkened. "That's a hell of a thing to say. She's not just someone I love. She's the reason I breathe, the reason I get up every day. You think I just slapped a Band-Aid on the grief and moved on? I didn't. I became someone else because I had to. And Mia, she's the only reason I'm still standing." Arya's face fell. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to suggest—" "Don't," he cut her off, drying his hands with forceful motions. "Don't make it sound like she's a crutch or a burden. She's not. She's everything." He turned, calling toward the living room. "Mia, get your coat." The little girl looked up from the puzzle she was working on, her eyes confused. "But we're not done playing." "We're going," Ethan said, already pulling his jacket on. Arya stood frozen, guilt and regret mixing in her throat. "Ethan, wait, please." But he didn't answer. He opened the door, letting the cool evening air rush in, and gently guided Mia outside. The door shut behind them with a thud that echoed in the now silent house. Arya stood alone in her kitchen, her hands, still damp, the dishes forgotten. The warmth from earlier had vanished, replaced by a hollowness she hadn't expected. She'd meant to ask a deeper question about identity, about loss. But what she'd done instead was touch a wound still too raw to bear. Outside, the wind began to stir again, rustling the leaves on the porch, and inside, Arya sat down in the quiet, staring at the puzzle Mia had left unfinished, one small piece resting by itself on the table. The air was colder than it had been in days. Clouds hung low and gray over the town, mirroring the weight Ethan carried in his chest. He hadn't planned on coming back. After the tense dinner and the harsh words exchanged, he told himself it was over, but as he paced around his workshop, he remembered his toolbox, still sitting in Arya's utility room. He pulled into her driveway, uncertain whether to knock or just retrieve his things and leave. The house looked quiet, lifeless. He stepped onto the porch and tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the house was warm but empty. The fire had gone out. He moved toward the back, scanning for his tools, but his attention caught on something in the dining room, a folder left open on the table. Curious, he stepped closer. A photo sat on top. Arya, seated in a sleek boardroom surrounded by suits. Her name was printed beneath it, Arya Lane, CEO of Lane Capital Holdings. Next to the photo were property maps, deed papers, and corporate development plans. Ethan recognized one of the names. Her company had just bought the land west of town. The puzzle pieces fell into place, fast and sharp. She wasn't just a woman looking for peace. She was the Arya Lane. The sound of footsteps broke his trance. Arya froze in the doorway when she saw him. "I forgot my tools," he said, his voice like ice. She stepped forward cautiously. "I was going to tell you." "When?" he shot back. "After I fixed your roof? After my daughter trusted you?" "Ethan, it's not what you think." "So what is it, a test? Come play poor and see how the working class reacts? I'm just a single dad, right? Easy mark." "No," she said quickly, her eyes filling. "I was trying to find out if someone could care about me without the name, without the money." "You lied to me." "I was escaping," she said, her voice cracking. "That life, those people, they never saw me." He stared at her, hurt, etched deep into his face. "Well, I saw you, and I let you in. I let my daughter love you, and now I don't even know who you are." He grabbed his toolbox and turned toward the door. "Believe me, please," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." He paused, looked back once. "You didn't. Just lie to me. You took something that was real and made it feel like a trick." Then he was gone. Arya stood there, stunned, the echo of the door slamming lingering longer than it should have. The house around her was painfully still. She walked to the couch and sat down, her hands trembling. The document still lay open, screaming the truth she had tried so hard to hide. Her eyes drifted to the coffee table, where one of Mia's puzzle pieces still sat. She picked it up, ran her thumb along its uneven edges. For all the deals she had closed, for all the buildings she had put her name on, this moment felt like her greatest failure, and the storm she had truly feared had just begun. The wind had picked up again that afternoon, whipping through the trees with a rising fury. Another storm was brewing. The sky darkened as Ethan stood on his porch, watching the clouds roll in, his chest tight with everything he had been trying not to feel: anger, guilt, and the slow crush of financial pressure. Inside, Mia sat curled up on the couch, knees to her chest, staring at the dark TV screen. She hadn't smiled or said much since they'd left Arya's house. Ethan knelt beside her. "You okay, kiddo?" She didn't answer at first, then asked, "Are we ever going to see her again?" Ethan sighed and brushed her hair back. "I don't know, sweetheart. But she didn't do anything wrong," Mia whispered. "You yelled at her." "I know," he said quietly. "It's complicated." "You always say that when you don't want to explain something." He gave a tired smile. "Why don't you go draw for a bit? I'll fix dinner soon. He moved to the kitchen, half listening to the storm warning on the radio. Wind gusts over 70 mi, possible blackouts. He checked the pantry. Cans, pasta, nothing fresh. Shopping would have to wait. 15 minutes later, he returned to the living room. Mia was gone. He called out, checked every room, bathroom, bedroom, hallway. Nothing. Then he saw the back, door ajar. Her yellow raincoat was missing. Panic surged in his chest. Mia! He ran outside, shouting her name, his voice carried by the wind. Neighbors came to their porches as he ran by. Have you seen Mia? 6 years old, brown hair, pink boots. She's gone. No one had seen her. Within minutes, people fanned out into the streets, flashlights in hand. Calls were made, search groups formed. Ethan ran through alleyways, schoolyards, the edge of the woods. Each second crawled. The rain began to fall in cold sheets, the wind howling louder. His mind raced. What if she fell in the creek? What if she was alone, cold, scared, or worse? His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He picked up. Hello, Ethan. It's Arya. He froze. I heard she's missing. I think I know where she might be. What? Where? She once told me the old church near the orchard looked like a castle. I'm heading there now. I'll meet you. He jumped in his truck and tore out of the driveway. The road was slick, branches littered the path, and visibility was almost gone. 10 minutes felt like forever. The church appeared ahead, looming like a shadow against the storm. He slammed on the brakes, ran to the doors, and shoved until they creaked open. Inside, wind blew through shattered stained glass. The pews were coated in dust. Then he heard it, a soft sob. He turned. Arya sat on the floor, holding Mia tight beneath her coat. The girl clung to her, soaked but safe. Ethan dropped to his knees. Mia! She looked up, tears streaming. Daddy! He pulled her into his arms, crushed her against his chest, kissed her hair. I've got you. I've got you. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I just wanted to see Arya. I didn't mean to scare you. You're okay, he whispered, his voice breaking. That's all that matters. He looked at Arya. Her hair was soaked, her face pale, but she had held Mia the whole time. You found her, he said. She nodded, her eyes wet. I was wrong, he said. About you. About everything. They stared at each other in the half-light, the storm raging just beyond the broken walls. You're not who I thought you were, he whispered. You're more. And there in the old church, something between them shifted. Quietly, completely, a broken piece of trust beginning to heal. The morning after the storm broke, soft and golden, as if the sky itself was trying to make amends. The streets were littered with broken branches and fallen leaves, but the worst had passed. In the quiet, that followed chaos. Something new had begun to stir between Ethan and Arya, something fragile but real. Later that afternoon, Ethan called her. You hungry? He asked, his voice hesitant. Mia keeps asking when her fairy godmother is coming. To dinner. Arya smiled through the phone. I could eat. When she arrived at Ethan's house, a small, time-worn cottage with creaky steps and a leaning mailbox, she was met by the smell of baked chicken and herbs wafting through the open windows. The inside was cozy, the furniture mismatched but loved, the walls full of hand-drawn pictures and old photos. A small fireplace crackled in the corner. Mia ran to her with a squeal, throwing her arms around her waist. I made place cards, the little girl announced, holding up index cards with scribbled names and glitter. Dinner was simple. Chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and a loaf of bread Ethan had somehow managed not to burn. They sat close, laughter replacing the silence that had once filled this house. Afterward, the three of them moved to the living room, where a jigsaw puzzle waited on the coffee table. They sat cross-legged on the floor, piecing together a scene of a lighthouse and stormy sea. Mia giggled. Whenever Ethan got a piece wrong, and Arya helped him pretend it was intentional. For a while, there was no past, no money, no guilt. Just the warmth of shared space, of being seen and accepted. Arya felt it most deeply when Mia leaned against her, eyes drooping with sleep, her head nestled into Arya's side as if it belonged there. When Mia finally dozed off on the couch, Ethan tucked a blanket over her and walked back to Arya, who stood quietly near the fireplace, her arms crossed. "You're home," she said softly. "It's nothing like mine, but somehow it feels more real than any place I've ever lived." He leaned against the wall, arms folded. "It's small. The roof leaks, the heat's spotty, but it's ours." She looked at him, searching his face. "Ethan, I want to do something bigger than me." He raised an eyebrow. "I've been thinking about it for a while," she continued. "I want to start a foundation, build homes for people who need them, single mothers, kids in the system, veterans. Not just buildings, real homes, safe places, warm places." His gaze softened. "I want to start it here," she said, "in this town, and I want you to be a part of it." He let out a breath. "Arya, that's..." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, handing it to him. "It's a proposal," she said. "Preliminary drafts. The budget's covered. All I need is someone to lead the design, someone who knows what home really means." Ethan opened it, flipping through the pages, the layout, the mission statement, the architectural notes with his name already penciled into the project plan. His hands trembled slightly. He started, then stopped. "I used to dream about this, back when I was still building luxury condos for people who didn't even care what they looked like. I thought one day I'd build something that mattered, but then life happened." Arya stepped closer. "Life brought you back to it." He looked up at her, something stirring in his chest that he hadn't dared name for years. "Why me?" "Because you never stopped building," she said. "Even when it was just you and Mia, you kept going. You built love, safety, a life. That's more than most." His voice was rough. "You're giving me a second chance. I'm giving us both one." He closed the folder, holding it to his chest. "Okay," he said, his voice thick. "Let's build something real." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the moment settling between them. Then Arya stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. "Ethan." He met her eyes, and then without hesitation, he kissed her. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was steady, grounding. Her hands moved to his chest, his to her waist, as the room around them disappeared into quiet. The only sound was the soft rhythm of Mia's breathing from the couch. When they pulled apart, neither said a word for a moment, but they didn't need to. In that kiss, something had been spoken more clearly than anything they'd said before. "We're not broken anymore. We're starting over together." The sky was painted in soft hues of blue and gold, a morning that seemed to promise something sacred. Where once there had been empty land, now stood rows of bright new homes, with white trim and flower-filled porches. Flags fluttered, children laughed, and banners reading Home of Hearts danced gently in the spring breeze. Ethan adjusted his tie beneath a white canopy at the center of it all. 1 year ago, he had arrived at Arya's doorstep, carrying only a toolbox and a heart burdened with loss. Today, he stood as the lead engineer of a housing project that had given homes to dozens of families, with more to come. He scanned the crowd until he spotted Mia. She wore a pale blue dress, her braids threaded with tiny white flowers. She looked radiant, at peace. A year ago, that light had dimmed in her eyes. Now it was back, brighter than ever. And then Arya, graceful, poised, standing by the media tent. She wore a flowing white dress and carried herself with a quiet strength that drew people to her. She'd given her name, her resources, and her heart to this mission, but never asked for praise. Ethan approached her as she turned toward him. "Everything's perfect," she said, smiling. "Almost," he replied, his smile hinting at something more. Her eyebrow lifted. "Almost. You'll see." The ceremony began shortly after. Community leaders thanked donors and volunteers, then invited Arya to speak. She stepped up to the podium, her voice clear but gentle. "I've spent most of my life in boardrooms," she began, surrounded by titles and numbers. I thought that was what success looked like. She paused, looking at Ethan and Mia, but I was wrong. I was lost, until one stormy night when a stranger answered my call for help. Not because he knew who I was, but because I needed someone. A single father, with enough on his shoulders already, came anyway. He didn't just fix my roof. He helped rebuild me. The crowd was still, moved by her words. And today, that man leads this project. That little girl, who once called me her fairy godmother, is now family. And this place, she motioned to the rows of homes, this is what real success looks like. Not power, but purpose. Not wealth, but love. As the audience rose in applause, Ethan walked toward her, taking her hand. Now? She asked, sensing the shift in his expression. He nodded and pulled a small box from his pocket. He didn't kneel. He simply looked at her, holding both her hands. This year changed everything. For Mia, for me, for you. You made space for us. You became our home. He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring holding a pale stone. It's not fancy, he said. Mia found the stone the night we met you. She said it reminded her of you, quiet, bright, and special. I had it set in silver. Because it's not about how much it costs. It's about what it means. His voice faltered just slightly. Will you marry me? Arya's eyes brimmed with tears as she nodded. Yes. Cheers erupted around them. Mia ran up and threw her, arms around them both. I told you she'd be our mommy, she whispered proudly. Later that afternoon, when the celebration had faded into warm chatter and goodbyes, the three of them walked hand in hand to the first completed home in the new development. A white ribbon stretched across the door. Together they pulled. The ribbon fluttered to the ground. Arya turned to them with a quiet smile. Ready? Ethan nodded. We've been ready. Mia squeezed their hands, beaming. Together, they stepped across the threshold, not just into a house, but into the life they had built. A life full of warmth, laughter, second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't arrive with grand promises, but grows in everyday acts of showing up. It wasn't just a happy ending. It was the beginning of home.